Maya Fletcher's sneakers hit the concrete in rapid succession as she hurried down the crowded sidewalk, weaving between slower pedestrians with the practiced ease of someone who had lived in the city her entire life. The manila folder pressed against her chest contained everything she needed for the interview at the Sterling Crown Hotel: copies of her resume, references from previous positions, and a handwritten cover letter she had labored over for 3 hours the night before. Her reflection caught in a shop window as she passed, long dark hair pulled back into what she hoped was a professional bun, the navy blazer she had borrowed from her roommate looking almost expensive in the right light. The morning had started with promise. Sunlight streaming through her apartment window, the smell of coffee filling the small kitchen as she rehearsed answers to potential interview questions. But then the subway had delays, and suddenly the comfortable cushion of time she had built into her schedule evaporated like steam from the sidewalk grates. She glanced at her phone. 10:43. The interview was scheduled for 11. The hotel was still 4 blocks away. Maya picked up her pace, her heart hammering not just from exertion, but from the weight of what this opportunity meant. 6 months of unemployment had drained her savings to almost nothing. The rent on her tiny studio was 3 weeks overdue, and her landlord, a gruff man named Mr. Kowalski, who smelled perpetually of cigars, had made it clear that his patience had limits. This interview represented more than just a job. It was a lifeline, a chance to stop the slow slide into financial disaster that had consumed her life since the marketing firm where she had worked abruptly closed its doors without warning. The sound reached her ears before she saw the source, a voice elderly and strained, calling out from somewhere near the curb. Maya's instinct was to keep moving, to protect the precious minutes she had left, but something in the tone, a genuine distress that cut through the usual urban noise, made her pause. She turned her head and saw an older woman in a wheelchair, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the obvious frustration on her face, struggling with one of the chair's wheels. The wheel had somehow wedged itself into a gap in the pavement, one of those irregular spaces where the asphalt met a metal grate, and the woman was pushing and pulling with increasing desperation. Maya looked at her phone again. 10:44. She looked at the woman. The wheelchair lurched slightly as another attempt to free it failed. Maya felt the moment stretch out, a crossroads presenting itself with cruel clarity. She could keep walking, arrive at the interview with a few minutes to spare, sit in the waiting area and collect herself before being called in. Or she could stop, help this stranger, and risk everything she had been working toward. The choice should have been simple. Self-preservation should have won. But Maya had never been particularly good at simple choices. She tucked the folder more securely under her arm and jogged over to the curb. The woman looked up as Maya approached, relief flooding her features. Her eyes were a striking shade of blue, sharp and intelligent, despite the lines that creased the corners. She wore a cream-colored silk blouse and tailored slacks, expensive jewelry glinting at her throat and wrists. Everything about her spoke of wealth and status, which made her current predicament all the more jarring. Maya knelt down beside the wheelchair, examining the trapped wheel. The metal rim had caught on the edge of the grate at an angle that prevented any simple extraction. She tugged experimentally, feeling the resistance. The woman watched her with a mixture of hope and embarrassment. Maya tried lifting the wheelchair while simultaneously pulling it backward, but the angle was wrong and the chair barely budged. Sweat began to form on her forehead despite the cool morning air. She repositioned herself, getting a better grip on the frame, and pulled harder. The wheel shifted slightly, metal scraping against metal with a sound that made both women wince. Maya's blazer strained at the shoulders as she adjusted her leverage, planting her feet more firmly on the sidewalk. She could feel curious glances from passing pedestrians, but no one else stopped to help. That was the city for you, she thought, always in a hurry, always assuming someone else would handle it. She pulled again, muscles burning, and finally felt something give. The wheel lifted free with a sudden release that nearly sent Maya tumbling backward. She caught herself, breathing hard, and straightened up. The woman was already testing the wheel, rolling forward and back to ensure everything worked properly. A smile of genuine gratitude spread across her face. Maya glanced at her phone as she caught her breath. 10:51. Her stomach dropped. There was no way she would make it now. Even if she ran the remaining blocks, even if she arrived breathless and disheveled, she would still be late. The hotel management was conducting back-to-back interviews all morning. They had been very specific in their email about punctuality. She felt the opportunity slipping away like sand through her fingers. But what was done was done. She had made her choice. The woman reached out and touched Maya's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. The blue eyes studied Maya's face with an intensity that was almost unnerving. She introduced herself as Catherine Westbrook, and her voice carried an authority that suggested she was accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Maya gave her own name in return, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice, as she explained that she needed to go, that she had somewhere important to be. Catherine asked where, and Maya found herself explaining about the interview, about how it had taken 3 applications and 2 follow-up calls just to get this appointment, about how she had been preparing for days, and now it was all ruined because she had stopped to help when she should have kept walking. The words tumbled out faster than Maya intended, frustration and fear mixing together in a way that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. She was not usually someone who shared her problems with strangers, but something about Catherine's calm attention made it easier to speak. When she finally ran out of words, Catherine simply nodded, as though Maya had confirmed something she had suspected all along. Catherine asked which hotel, and when Maya told her the Sterling Crown, something flickered across the older woman's face. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. Before Maya could analyze it further, Catherine was pulling a business card from her purse and pressing it into Maya's hand. The card was heavy stock, expensive, with embossed lettering that caught the light. Catherine told her to call the number later that afternoon, that perhaps she could help, that good deeds should not go punished. Maya wanted to argue, to explain that she was not looking for charity, but Catherine had already signaled to someone, and a dark sedan pulled up to the curb as if summoned by magic. A driver emerged, helped Catherine into the back seat with practiced efficiency, and folded the wheelchair into the trunk. Maya stood on the sidewalk, clutching the business card, as the sedan merged into traffic and disappeared. She looked at the card more closely. Catherine Westbrook, it read, Chair of the Board, Westbrook Industries. No other information, just a phone number embossed beneath the title. Maya had heard of Westbrook Industries, of course. Everyone in the city had. They owned half the commercial real estate downtown, had fingers in hotels and retail and development projects that reshaped entire neighborhoods. Chair of the board. Maya felt a flutter of something between hope and disbelief. She tucked the card carefully into her folder and turned toward the hotel, even though she knew it was too late. She had to try anyway, had to at least show up and explain, even if it was futile. The Sterling Crown Hotel rose before her 10 minutes later, all glass and polished brass, with uniformed doormen stationed at the entrance like guards at a palace. Maya took the steps 2 at a time, pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that smelled of expensive flowers and furniture polish. The front desk stretched along one wall, marble and dark wood, and behind it stood a man in a crisp suit, examining a computer screen with the focused attention of someone who did not like to be interrupted. Maya approached, gave her name, explained that she was here for an interview, but that she had been unavoidably detained. The man, whose nameplate identified him as Gregory Hammond, barely looked up. He informed her in a tone that suggested he had repeated this speech many times, that the interview slots had been scheduled with precision, that her assigned time had passed, that the hiring manager had already moved on to other candidates. Maya tried to explain about helping someone, about the wheelchair, about how it had only been a few minutes, but Gregory held up one hand to stop her. His expression was not unkind, merely indifferent, the look of someone who had heard every excuse and believed none of them. He suggested that she check the hotel's website for future openings, wished her a good day in a tone that indicated the conversation was over, and returned his attention to the computer screen. Maya stood there for a moment, folder pressed against her chest like a shield that had failed to protect her, and then turned and walked back through the lobby with as much dignity as she could muster. The doorman held the door open for her, his face carefully neutral, and Maya stepped back out into the sunlight feeling hollower than she had in months. She found a bench in a small plaza a block away and sat down heavily, her legs suddenly unsteady. The folder lay beside her, all that preparation rendered meaningless. She thought about the stack of overdue bills on her kitchen counter, about the conversation she would need to have with Mr. Kowalski, about the dwindling number of job postings she had not yet applied to. The city moved around her, indifferent to her private disaster. Delivery trucks rumbled past. Office workers hurried by with take-out coffee and urgent expressions. A street musician played saxophone somewhere nearby, the notes floating on the morning air. Maya pulled out Catherine's business card again, turning it over in her hands. The weight of it felt substantial, real, but also somehow surreal. What could the chair of a major corporation possibly do for her now? Still, she had been told to call, and Maya Fletcher had learned long ago that pride was a luxury she could not afford. She waited until mid-afternoon, partly to give herself time to calm down, and partly because calling too eagerly seemed desperate. When she finally dialed the number, a woman answered on the second ring, professional and efficient, asking how she could direct the call. Maya explained that Catherine Westbrook had asked her to call, gave her name, and was put on hold before she could say anything else. Classical music played softly in her ear. She waited, watching pigeons peck at crumbs near her feet, and then the hold music cut off, and Catherine's voice came through the line, warm and immediately recognizable. They spoke for 20 minutes. Catherine asked questions about Maya's background, her experience, her skills. She wanted to know what Maya had studied in college, what kind of work she had done before, what her goals were. The questions felt more like a conversation than an interrogation, and Maya found herself answering honestly, even about the parts of her resume that were less impressive. When Catherine finally got around to explaining why she had wanted Maya to call, the words came out matter-of-fact, as though what she was proposing was perfectly reasonable. She wanted Maya to meet her son, not for a date exactly, although that was part of it. She wanted Maya to consider a business arrangement, one that would benefit both parties. Catherine spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision, but the essential idea was clear enough. Marriage, a contract, an exchange of needs and solutions. Maya's first instinct was to laugh, to assume this was some kind of elaborate joke or scam. People did not propose arranged marriages over the phone to strangers they had met on the sidewalk. But Catherine kept talking, her voice never wavering, and slowly the laughter died in Maya's throat as she realized this was serious. Catherine explained that her son, Nathan, was the president of Westbrook Industries, that he was brilliant and driven but also stubborn and resistant to settling down, that the family needed stability and continuity that only marriage could provide. She explained that she had been watching for someone with the right character, someone who showed kindness without calculation, someone genuine. She explained that she had resources and connections that could change Maya's life, if Maya was willing to take an unconventional path. Maya sat on the bench, phone pressed to her ear, and tried to process what she was hearing. The practical part of her brain, the part that had been tallying bills and calculating how many more weeks she could survive without income, was already doing math. The other part, The part that had been raised on romantic comedies and fairy tales, despite her better judgment, was screaming that this was insane. She asked Catherine what exactly this arrangement would entail, and Catherine laid it out with the clarity of a business proposal. Marriage, on paper at first, living together to maintain appearances, separate lives in most respects, unless both parties decided otherwise. In exchange, Catherine would guarantee Maya a position at one of the family's companies, a salary that would erase her financial worries, housing, security. The arrangement would last a minimum of 1 year, at which point it could be dissolved if both parties wished, or it could continue if circumstances had changed. Maya asked why Nathan could not find someone on his own, and Catherine's answer was both cryptic and revealing. She said that Nathan had found plenty of someones, women who were interested in the Westbrook name and fortune, but not in Nathan himself. She said that he had grown cynical, that he threw himself into work to avoid personal connections, that he needed someone who saw him as a person rather than a bank account. She said that forcing the issue was the only way to break through his defenses, and that she believed Maya was exactly the kind of person who could do that, even if Maya herself did not see it yet. The conversation ended with Catherine asking Maya to think about it, to meet Nathan, before making any decisions, to at least give the idea a chance. Maya agreed to think, though she suspected she already knew what her answer would be. She thanked Catherine for the call, ended it, and sat staring at her phone for a long time afterward. The afternoon sun was warm on her face. The saxophone player had moved on, replaced by the distant wail of sirens. Maya thought about her empty bank account, about the interview she had missed, about the look of polite dismissal on Gregory Hammond's face. She thought about Catherine's sharp blue eyes and the certainty in her voice. She thought about how her mother always said that opportunities came in strange packages, and that the trick was recognizing them when they appeared. Sophie called that evening while Maya was heating up instant ramen in her tiny kitchen. Sophie had been Maya's friend since their freshman year of college, when they had been randomly assigned as roommates, and discovered they both loved terrible reality TV and could quote entire scenes from movies most people had forgotten. Sophie now worked in graphic design, lived with her boyfriend in a slightly nicer apartment across town, and had a talent for knowing when Maya needed someone to talk to. Maya answered on the third ring, cradling the phone between her shoulder and ear as she stirred noodles. Sophie asked how the interview had gone, her voice bright with expectation, and Maya had to explain the whole disaster. The wheelchair, the trapped wheel, the missed interview, the curt dismissal at the hotel desk. Sophie made sympathetic noises, offered to bring over wine and ice cream, suggested they could spend the evening applying to more jobs together. But then Maya mentioned the phone call, and Sophie's tone changed from sympathy to disbelief. She made Maya repeat the details twice, asking clarifying questions about whether this Catherine person had seemed legitimate, whether this might be some elaborate human trafficking scheme, whether Maya had lost her mind, even considering such a thing. Maya found herself defending the idea, even as part of her agreed with Sophie's skepticism. She pointed out that Catherine was a known public figure, that Westbrook Industries was a legitimate company, that this was not some anonymous internet stranger asking her to wire money to a foreign account. Sophie countered that real people could still be dangerous, that desperation made people vulnerable to manipulation, that Maya needed to be careful. They argued back and forth, their voices rising, until finally Sophie sighed and asked what Maya was actually going to do. Maya admitted she did not know, that the sensible answer was to decline politely and keep looking for regular employment, but that some part of her was curious, was tempted, was wondering if maybe this was one of those moments that divided a life into before and after. Sophie was quiet for a moment, and then she asked Maya to promise that if she did agree to meet this Nathan person, she would do it in a public place and would text Sophie the location and time in advance. Maya promised. Sophie told her to be careful, to trust her instincts, to remember that no amount of money was worth compromising her safety or her values. Maya thanked her, ended the call, and ate her ramen while it was still hot, staring at the wall of her kitchen where a water stain shaped vaguely like a map of South America had been slowly expanding for months. The landlord kept saying he would fix it, but the promises never materialized into action. Maya thought about living somewhere without water stains, without the constant anxiety of calculating whether she had enough for both groceries and electricity. She thought about what she would be giving up, what she would be risking, what she would be becoming if she agreed to this strange bargain. She called Catherine back the next morning and said yes, she would meet Nathan, but that she was not promising anything beyond that one meeting. Catherine sounded pleased, but not surprised, as though she had known all along what Maya's answer would be. She suggested a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory, 11 o'clock on Thursday. Maya agreed, wrote down the address, and spent the next 2 days in a state of nervous anticipation that made it hard to focus on anything else. She researched Westbrook Industries, reading articles about their expansion projects and charitable foundations. She found photos of Nathan at various corporate events, a tall man with dark hair and a serious expression, always in expensive suits, never smiling for the cameras. He looked competent and distant, like someone who had learned early that showing too much made you vulnerable. Thursday arrived with overcast skies that threatened rain, but never quite delivered. Maya changed outfits 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a green sweater that Sophie had once said brought out her eyes. She arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, ordered a latte she was too nervous to drink, and claimed a table near the window where she could watch the door. The place smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, was decorated with mismatched furniture and local artwork on the walls, played indie folk music at a volume that allowed for conversation. Other customers tapped on laptops or read books, creating the comfortable buzz of public privacy. Catherine arrived exactly on time, and with her came Nathan. He held the door for his mother as her driver helped maneuver the wheelchair inside, and then he straightened and scanned the room with the efficient gaze of someone used to assessing situations quickly. His eyes found Maya, and she saw him register her presence, some calculation happening behind that neutral expression. He was taller than the photos had suggested, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about whether you belonged in a room. Catherine smiled when she saw Maya and wheeled over to the table with Nathan following a step behind. The introductions were awkward in the way that all arranged meetings were awkward, everyone aware of the artificiality of the situation but trying to pretend it was natural. Catherine made small talk about the weather, about the quality of the coffee, about how charming this neighborhood was, while Nathan sat rigid in his chair and examined Maya with an expression she could not quite read. After a few minutes of this stilted conversation, Catherine announced that she needed to make some phone calls and wheeled herself to a table across the room, leaving Maya and Nathan alone together. The silence stretched out between them. Nathan wrapped his hands around his coffee cup but did not drink. Maya searched for something to say that would not sound ridiculous given the circumstances. Finally, Nathan spoke first, his voice low and controlled. He said that he wanted to apologize for his mother's interference, that he had not asked for this meeting, that he understood if Maya wanted to leave immediately and pretend this had never happened. There was something defensive in his tone, a preemptive rejection that made Maya understand that he expected her to be as skeptical of this arrangement as he was. Instead of leaving, Maya asked him why he had agreed to come if he found the whole thing so objectionable. Nathan's expression flickered with surprise, and then something that might have been respect. He admitted that his mother had ways of getting what she wanted, that she held considerable power in the family business, that refusing her directly was rarely worth the consequences. He said that he had agreed to one meeting to satisfy her, after which he assumed they would both politely decline and move on with their lives. Maya nodded slowly and told him that seemed like a reasonable assumption, except that she was not entirely sure she wanted to decline. That got his full attention. Nathan set down his coffee and leaned forward slightly, studying her face as though trying to determine if she was serious or mocking him. Maya explained her situation without embellishment: the unemployment, the overdue rent, the lack of prospects, the months of sending out resumes into what felt like a void. She told him that she had no illusions about romance or fate, that she understood this would be a business arrangement, but that from a purely practical standpoint, it solved several problems she had been unable to solve on her own. She said that she was willing to consider it seriously if he was, but that she needed to know what he actually wanted out of this arrangement, because his mother's goals and his own might not be the same thing. Nathan was quiet for a long time, his fingers drumming once against the table in an unconscious rhythm. Then he started to talk, slowly at first, and then with more candor than Maya had expected. He explained that his mother was right about some things, that his personal life was non-existent because he had never found someone he could trust to want him rather than his wealth, that the parade of calculated smiles and strategic interest had made him cynical about the possibility of genuine connection. He said that his mother's solution was extreme and invasive, but that there was a logic to it he could not entirely dismiss. A marriage of convenience, clear terms, no false expectations, might actually be easier than continuing to navigate the minefield of normal dating, where everyone had ulterior motives they pretended not to have. Maya asked what would happen after a year if they went through with this, and Nathan said that his mother had promised to leave him alone about marriage for at least 5 years if he cooperated now, that it would buy him time to focus on the company without constant pressure to settle down. He said that from his perspective, 1 year of maintaining appearances in exchange for 5 years of peace was not a terrible trade, especially if the other person in the arrangement was equally pragmatic and honest about what they wanted. He asked Maya point blank if she was someone who could handle a business partnership that looked like a marriage on the outside, and Maya surprised herself by saying yes, she thought she could, as long as the terms were clear and the expectations reasonable. They talked for another hour, Catherine watching from across the room with what looked like satisfaction, and by the end of it they had sketched out the basic framework of an agreement: separate bedrooms, at least initially, public appearances together when required by family or business obligations, freedom to pursue their own careers and interests, honesty about where the boundaries were and when they might need to shift. Nathan said he would have his attorney draw up a formal contract, something that protected both parties and laid out exactly what was expected. Maya agreed, though the word contract made the whole thing feel more surreal, like she was negotiating a merger rather than a marriage. Catherine joined them as they were preparing to leave, asking how the conversation had gone with an innocence that fooled no one. Nathan told her they were moving forward, his tone resigned, but not entirely unhappy, and Catherine beamed as though she had just witnessed something wonderful, rather than orchestrated something calculated. She told Maya that they would need to handle the paperwork quickly, that there was no point in dragging out the process once a decision had been made. She suggested the following Tuesday for the ceremony, just a simple civil proceeding with her as a witness. Nothing elaborate or public. Maya felt her heart rate spike at how fast this was moving, but she also understood the logic. Waiting would only provide more opportunities to second-guess, to back out, to let fear override practical necessity. Maya spent the weekend in a daze, going through the motions of daily life while knowing that everything was about to change. She told Sophie, who reacted with a mixture of concern and fascination, insisting on meeting Nathan before any paperwork was signed. Maya arranged a dinner at a casual restaurant, just the four of them, Catherine included because she refused to be left out. Sophie arrived dressed like she was conducting an interrogation, asked Nathan pointed questions about his intentions and his character, watched him with narrow eyes that promised consequences if he turned out to be lying about anything. Nathan handled it with more patience than Maya expected, answering honestly, acknowledging Sophie's right to be protective of her friend, even making Sophie laugh once or twice with dry observations about his mother's managing tendencies. By the end of the evening, Sophie was not entirely convinced this was a good idea, but she admitted that at least Nathan seemed like a decent human being who was genuinely trying to make the best of an unconventional situation. She pulled Maya aside as they were leaving and made her promise to stay in touch, to call if anything felt wrong, to remember that she always had somewhere to go if she needed to leave. Maya hugged her, grateful for the concern, even as she felt more certain than ever that she was making the right choice. It was not a traditional choice, not a romantic choice, but it was a choice that gave her control over her circumstances rather than leaving her at the mercy of them. Tuesday arrived cold and bright. Maya wore a simple dress she had bought the day before, nothing fancy but appropriate for the occasion. Nathan picked her up in a town car, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Maya's former rent. They drove to the courthouse, mostly in silence, the city sliding by outside the tinted windows. Catherine was already there when they arrived, having insisted on being part of this, despite Nathan's protests that they could handle it themselves. She wore an elegant lavender suit and a pearl necklace, looked utterly pleased with herself as she watched them approach the building. The ceremony itself took less than 20 minutes. A municipal clerk who performed dozens of these every week read through the standard language, asked them to confirm their names and their intent to marry, had them sign documents on a clipboard. Nathan's hand was steady as he signed. Maya's trembled slightly, not from doubt, but from the sheer strangeness of the moment. The clerk declared them legally married, mentioned that they could kiss if they wanted to, and then moved on to filing the paperwork when neither of them moved to do so. Catherine signed as their witness, produced a marriage certificate that would arrive in the mail in a few weeks, and then insisted on taking them to lunch to celebrate, even though neither Maya nor Nathan was particularly in a celebratory mood. They went to a restaurant Catherine favored, expensive and quiet, where the staff knew her by name and treated her with the deference reserved for regular customers who tipped well. Over soup and salad that Maya barely tasted, Catherine outlined her next move, which was to install Maya and Nathan in the family penthouse. Nathan started to object, saying he had his own place and preferred his independence, but Catherine cut him off with the kind of authority that made it clear this was not a negotiation. She said that married couples lived together, that appearance mattered, that the whole point of this arrangement was to present a united front to the business world and to potential rivals who might see Nathan's unmarried status as a weakness. She had already had Maya's belongings moved from her apartment, she announced, and the penthouse was ready for both of them. Maya blinked, trying to process the fact that her things had been moved without her permission or knowledge. Catherine must have seen something in her expression because she reached across the table and patted Maya's hand, saying not to worry, that everything had been carefully packed and nothing was damaged, that this was simply efficient use of time. Nathan looked like he wanted to argue further, but seemed to realize it would be pointless. They finished lunch in relative silence, and then the town car drove them to an address on the Upper East Side, a building that was all gleaming glass and modern architecture, with a doorman who greeted Catherine warmly and Nathan with professional respect. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of the building. Maya stepped out of the private elevator into a space that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city that stretched for miles. The furniture was sleek and expensive, all clean lines and neutral colors. The kitchen had appliances Maya did not recognize, and the bathrooms had heated floors and rain showers large enough for 3 people. Catherine gave them a tour, pointing out the bedrooms on the 2nd floor, the 2 of which were on opposite ends of a long hallway and thus would provide plenty of privacy. Maya's belongings had indeed been moved, her clothes hung in one of the walk-in closets, her books arranged on built-in shelves, her few personal items placed on surfaces with a care that suggested someone had tried to make it feel like home. Nathan disappeared into what Catherine identified as his office, a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk where he apparently spent most of his time when not at the Westbrook Industries headquarters. Maya was left standing in the living room, trying to absorb the fact that this was now where she lived, that she had gone from a studio with water stains to a penthouse with a view in the space of a few days. Catherine seemed to sense her overwhelm and suggested they have tea, which turned out to mean that Catherine wheeled herself into the kitchen and instructed Maya on where to find the expensive tea collection and the proper china cups. They sat together at the kitchen island, and Catherine talked about her own marriage to Nathan's father, how it had started with love but curdled over the years into resentment and competition, how she wished she had been wiser in her choices when she was young. She told Maya that she saw potential in this arrangement that went beyond simple pragmatism, that she believed Maya had qualities Nathan needed, patience and warmth, and a refusal to be intimidated by wealth or status. She said that Nathan had closed himself off after too many disappointments, that he had learned to function without emotional connection, but that no one should live that way indefinitely. She said she was not trying to force romance, but she was trying to create the conditions where it might be possible if both parties were willing to let it happen. Maya listened, unsure what to say, because how did you respond to someone who had just admitted to manipulating your life for what she claimed were benevolent purposes? The first weeks of living together were an exercise in careful navigation. Nathan kept to his schedule with the rigidity of someone who relied on routine for stability. He woke at 5:30, worked out in the building's gym, showered and dressed, ate a breakfast of precisely measured portions while reading financial news on his tablet, and left for the office by 7:30. He returned late, usually after Maya had already eaten dinner, went directly to his office, and emerged only briefly before going to bed. They crossed paths at odd hours, exchanged polite greetings, respected each other's space. It felt less like being married and more like being roommates who happened to share an incredibly expensive apartment. Maya spent the early days exploring the neighborhood, getting used to the reality of having money she did not have to anxiously manage. Catherine had arranged for her to receive a salary as a consultant for Westbrook Industries, and the amount that appeared in Maya's new bank account made her check the numbers twice to make sure there had not been an error. She paid off her debts, settled her account with Mr. Kowalski, took Sophie out for a celebratory dinner at a restaurant they had always walked past but never entered because the prices scared them away. She bought new clothes that fit properly, replaced her laptop that had been held together with electrical tape, spent an afternoon in a bookstore selecting hardcovers she wanted rather than calculating whether she could afford them. But the money did not entirely erase the strangeness of her situation. She was married, legally bound to someone she barely knew, living in his space, even though Catherine insisted it was now their space. She tried to make small adjustments that would make the penthouse feel more like home, adding throw pillows to the couch, bringing in plants that needed less than perfect light, moving furniture slightly to create more comfortable arrangements. Nathan noticed but said nothing, which Maya interpreted as either acceptance or indifference. One evening about 3 weeks in, Maya was cooking dinner when Nathan came home earlier than usual. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, clearly surprised to find someone at the stove, and asked what she was making. Maya explained it was a pasta dish her mother used to make, nothing fancy but comforting, and asked if he wanted to join her. Nathan hesitated, probably calculating the social obligation against his preference for solitude, and then agreed with a stiffness that suggested he was trying. They ate at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining table, and the conversation was stilted at first, full of pauses and topics that went nowhere. But then Nathan asked about her mother's cooking, and Maya found herself talking about growing up in a small town upstate, about how her parents had owned a bakery that barely made enough to survive, but always smelled like heaven, about how she had learned to crack eggs with one hand because her mother believed that was an essential skill. Nathan listened with what seemed like genuine interest, and when Maya asked about his childhood, he talked about growing up with more money than he needed, but less attention than he wanted, about parents who were always either working or fighting, about boarding schools that taught him self-reliance but also loneliness. There was an unexpected vulnerability in the way he spoke, as though he had not talked about these things in a while, and was surprised to find himself doing so now. The conversation carried them through dinner and into the evening, and when they finally went to their separate bedrooms, Maya felt like maybe they had taken a small step toward actually knowing each other. The turning point came when Catherine announced that she had secured a position for Maya at the Sterling Crown Hotel, the same place where Maya had missed her interview months before. Maya was stunned when Catherine revealed this, asking how that was even possible, and Catherine simply smiled and said that Westbrook Industries had significant connections in the hospitality industry, that a recommendation from her carried weight, that Maya should consider it a late wedding gift. The position was administrative coordinator, working directly under the operations manager, a woman named Helen Garcia, who Catherine described as fair but demanding. Maya would start the following Monday, which gave her the weekend to prepare. Nathan, surprisingly, seemed pleased by this development. He told Maya over breakfast that Saturday morning that he respected her wanting to work rather than simply living off the family money, that he had worried she might become bored or resentful if she had nothing to occupy her time. Maya appreciated the sentiment, but also felt the need to clarify that she had always intended to work, that financial security was wonderful, but purpose mattered more. Nathan nodded, said he understood, and then asked if she needed help preparing. Maya was not sure what kind of help he could offer, but she said yes anyway, and they spent part of that afternoon with Nathan quizzing her on hotel management basics and industry terminology he knew from his family's investments in the sector. Monday arrived, and Maya dressed carefully, professional but not overly formal, wanting to make a good impression without looking like she was trying too hard. Nathan offered to have his driver take her, but Maya declined, saying she wanted to take the subway like a normal person. Nathan looked like he wanted to argue, but respected her choice. The Sterling Crown Hotel looked exactly as it had the day she had been turned away, all polished surfaces and quiet elegance. The difference this time was that when Maya gave her name at the front desk, the receptionist smiled warmly and called for Helen Garcia, who appeared within minutes. Helen was in her mid-50s, with silver streaked through her dark hair and a handshake that conveyed both welcome and expectation. She led Maya through the employee areas, introduced her to key staff members, explained the filing systems and computer programs they used. The work was not glamorous, mostly coordinating schedules and managing vendor relationships and solving small crises before they became large ones, but Maya threw herself into it with determination. She arrived early, stayed late, learned everyone's names, made herself useful. Helen watched with approval, occasionally offering advice or correction, but mostly letting Maya find her own rhythm. The other employees were a mix of reactions. Some were friendly and welcoming, happy to have another pair of hands to help with the constant demands of running a luxury hotel. Others were more reserved, clearly wondering how someone with no hospitality experience had landed a position this secure this quickly. And then there was Vanessa Reed, the guest services manager, who regarded Maya with barely concealed suspicion from the moment they met. Vanessa was in her early 30s, attractive in a sharp-edged way, with blonde hair always perfectly styled, and a wardrobe that suggested she spent a significant portion of her salary on maintaining her appearance. She had been at the Sterling Crown for 5 years, had worked her way up from front desk associate to her current position, and clearly saw herself as next in line for any opportunities that arose. During Maya's second week, Vanessa cornered her in the break room and asked directly how Maya had gotten the job. The question was phrased politely, but the underlying accusation was clear. Maya considered her options, decided that honesty was probably the best approach, and explained that she had a family connection that had opened the door, but that she intended to prove she deserved to be there through her work. Vanessa's smile did not reach her eyes as she said that connections could only take you so far. That actual talent was what mattered in the long run. Maya agreed, trying to diffuse the tension. But Vanessa had already made up her mind that Maya was a threat. The hostility might have remained a minor annoyance if not for Jason Palmer. Jason worked in the hotel's sales department, was responsible for booking large events and corporate functions, and had a reputation for being charming with clients and difficult with colleagues. Maya met him her third day when he came by Helen's office to discuss a contract issue. He was handsome in a calculated way, with styled hair and expensive cologne, and he spoke with the confidence of someone who was used to getting what he wanted through personality rather than substance. Helen introduced them, and Jason's eyes flickered with interest when he heard Maya's last name, Westbrook. He asked if she was related to the Westbrook Industries family, and when Maya confirmed that she was married to Nathan Westbrook, Jason's entire demeanor changed. The easy smile became more calculated, the casual friendliness sharpened into something that felt like assessment. Later that week, Sophie came by the hotel to have lunch with Maya, and they sat in a cafe across the street eating sandwiches while Maya caught her up on everything. Sophie listened with the combination of support and skepticism she brought to most of Maya's life updates, and when Maya mentioned Vanessa and Jason, Sophie's expression darkened. She asked Maya to describe Jason more specifically, and when Maya did, Sophie's face went pale. She said that Jason sounded exactly like her ex-boyfriend, the one who had cheated on her and then tried to gaslight her into thinking she was imagining things. Maya confirmed the description matched, and Sophie nodded grimly. She said that Jason Palmer was indeed her ex, that she had not known he worked at the Sterling Crown, that the breakup had been brutal, and she had spent months recovering from the emotional damage. Maya reached across the table and squeezed Sophie's hand, told her that she would keep her distance from Jason, that she understood why Sophie had been so protective during the dinner with Nathan. Sophie appreciated the gesture, but warned Maya to be careful, that Jason was good at identifying what people wanted and using it against them, that he saw relationships as transactions where he needed to come out ahead. Maya promised to be cautious, but part of her wondered how much trouble one sales executive could really cause. She had underestimated the capacity for workplace drama, a lesson she would learn more thoroughly in the months ahead. At home, the relationship with Nathan continued its slow evolution from strangers to something resembling friends. They fell into a routine of eating dinner together a few times a week, comparing notes about their respective days, discovering small points of commonality. Nathan told stories about difficult board meetings and expansion projects that were behind schedule. Maya described the intricate social dynamics of hotel staff and the satisfaction of solving problems efficiently. They found they both loved old mystery novels and terrible action movies, that they both preferred coffee strong and black, that they both had a tendency to work too much and relax too little. One Saturday, Catherine invited them both to lunch at her personal residence, a brownstone in a historic neighborhood that she had kept after her separation from Nathan's father. The house was elegant but comfortable, filled with art and books and the kind of furniture that had been selected for beauty rather than status. Catherine greeted them warmly, served a meal she claimed to have cooked herself, though Nathan whispered that she definitely had help, and talked about Westbrook Industries as though Maya were a full member of the family rather than a contractual addition. She asked about Maya's work at the hotel, praised her for taking initiative, suggested that there might be opportunities for advancement if Maya proved herself capable. During dessert, Catherine brought up the topic of public appearances. She explained that there would be events over the coming months where Nathan was expected to attend, galas and fundraisers and corporate dinners where being seen with a spouse would be valuable. She asked if Maya would be comfortable filling that role, and Maya said yes, though privately she was nervous about the idea of being scrutinized by a high society. Nathan must have sensed her anxiety because he told her not to worry, that most of these events were tedious rather than challenging, that the key was to smile politely and avoid getting cornered by people who wanted to pitch business ideas. Catherine added that she would make sure Maya had appropriate clothes for these occasions, that no one would judge her for anything except perhaps having questionable taste in husbands. Nathan rolled his eyes at his mother's joke, but Maya saw him fighting a smile. The first event was a charity auction for a children's hospital foundation. Maya spent 2 hours getting ready, trying on the 3 designer dresses Catherine had sent over, before settling on a midnight blue gown that felt both elegant and not entirely foreign to her personality. Nathan appeared in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like he had stepped out of a magazine, and for a moment they just stared at each other, both surprised by how the other cleaned up. The driver took them to a hotel ballroom that was decorated with flowers and soft lighting, where several hundred people in expensive clothes milled about drinking champagne and examining auction items displayed on tables around the perimeter. Nathan introduced Maya to what felt like dozens of people, corporate executives and philanthropists and society figures whose names Maya tried desperately to remember. Everyone was polite, though Maya caught evaluating glances, people trying to determine who she was and whether she mattered. She smiled, shook hands, made small talk about the auction items and the work of the foundation. Beside her, Nathan was smoothly professional, attentive in a way that suggested genuine affection, even though Maya knew it was performance. At one point, he placed his hand on the small of her back to guide her through the crowd, and Maya was surprised by how natural the gesture felt, how easily they fell into the rhythm of looking like a real couple. Midway through the evening, Maya excused herself to use the restroom and found herself alone in the elegant lounge area adjacent to the ballroom. She was checking her reflection in the mirror, making sure nothing was out of place, when Vanessa Reed walked in. Maya had not realized Vanessa would be here, but of course a hotel manager would be invited to major charity events where potential clients might be networking. Vanessa's expression when she saw Maya was not friendly. She made a comment about how surprising it was to see the new administrative coordinator mingling with society's elite, how quickly Maya seemed to be climbing the social ladder. Maya responded carefully, saying she was here because her husband had been invited, nothing more complicated than that. Vanessa's laugh was sharp. She said that nothing more complicated was rarely true when Westbrook money was involved, that Maya should be careful about getting too comfortable in a world she did not actually belong to. The words stung, more than Maya wanted to admit, hitting on insecurities she had been trying to suppress. She was saved from having to respond by another woman entering the lounge, someone Vanessa apparently knew, and Maya took the opportunity to escape back to the ballroom. She found Nathan talking with a group of investors, and when he saw her face, he immediately excused himself and came over to ask if she was all right. Maya said she was fine, just needed some air, and Nathan guided her out to a balcony where they could escape the crowd for a moment. The night air was cool and helped clear her head. Nathan did not push for details, just stood beside her in comfortable silence until Maya felt ready to go back inside. The rest of the evening passed without incident, and by the time they returned to the penthouse, Maya was exhausted from the effort of maintaining the performance. She kicked off her heels the moment they were through the door, which made Nathan laugh. He admitted that he hated these events, that they felt like work disguised as socializing, that he only attended because it was expected. Maya said she understood why he found them draining. Nathan looked at her thoughtfully and said she had done well, that no one watching them would have doubted for a second that they were happily married. Maya was not sure if that was a compliment or an observation, but she chose to take it as the former. As winter turned towards spring, Maya found her confidence at the hotel growing. Helen began giving her more responsibility, trusting her to handle vendor negotiations and schedule conflicts without constant supervision. The other employees warmed to her as they saw that she was willing to work hard and did not expect special treatment despite her family connections. Even the skeptical ones began to accept that she belonged there, or at least that she was not going away. The exception remained Vanessa, whose subtle hostility evolved into active undermining. She would schedule meetings without including Maya, fail to pass along important information, make comments in front of other staff that questioned Maya's competence. Maya tried to handle it professionally, to let her work speak for itself, but the constant needling wore on her. Jason Palmer was a different kind of problem. He was not overtly hostile like Vanessa, but his attention felt predatory in a way that made Maya uncomfortable. He found reasons to stop by Helen's office when Maya was there, asked questions about her relationship with Nathan that were too personal, made comments about how Maya was too genuine for the world of corporate marriages. Sophie had warned her about his tactics, and Maya recognized them for what they were: attempts to create an inappropriate connection based on false sympathy and implied understanding. She shut him down politely but firmly every time, made sure they were never alone together, and mentioned his behavior to Nathan during one of their dinners at home. Nathan's response was immediate and protective. He said that Jason Palmer had a reputation in business circles for being ethically flexible, that the hotel kept him because he was good at his job, but that management had received complaints about his conduct before. He asked if Maya wanted him to intervene, and Maya said no, she could handle it herself, but she appreciated knowing he would support her if it became necessary. Nathan looked like he wanted to argue, but respected her choice. He did, however, make a point of showing up at the hotel a few days later to take Maya to lunch, making sure to greet Jason in the lobby with a handshake that conveyed polite warning more than friendliness. The incident crystallized something for both of them, the realization that their arrangement had evolved beyond simple contractual obligation into something that resembled actual partnership. They were not just maintaining appearances, they were building a life together, even if neither of them was quite ready to name what that meant. Nathan started making small gestures that suggested he was thinking about Maya's comfort, buying her favorite coffee when he stopped on the way home, asking about her day with genuine interest rather than polite ritual, making sure she had everything she needed in the spaces they shared. Maya found herself doing the same, learning his preferences and habits, leaving notes when she knew he had difficult meetings scheduled, cooking meals she thought he would enjoy. Catherine noticed the shift during one of her regular visits to the penthouse. She came by for tea one afternoon when Nathan was still at work, and she watched Maya move through the kitchen with the ease of someone who had made herself at home. She commented that Maya seemed settled, and Maya agreed that the penthouse no longer felt foreign. Catherine smiled and said she was glad, that she had hoped Maya would find her place here. Then she asked carefully whether Maya was happy. Maya had to think about that question. Happy was complicated. She was secure financially in a way she had never imagined, was doing work she found meaningful, was living in comfort she could not have achieved on her own. But she was also in a marriage that was not quite real, bound to someone she liked but did not love, playing a role that sometimes felt more honest than the actual relationship beneath it. She told Catherine something close to the truth, that she was content, that she did not regret her choice, that Nathan was a better person than he let most people see. Catherine seemed satisfied with that answer, or at least willing to accept it for now. She said that contentment was not a small thing, that many people spent their whole lives chasing it without success, that Maya should not discount the value of peace and stability. Then she changed the subject to business, telling Maya that there was an opening coming up at the Sterling Crown for an assistant operations manager, that Helen had recommended Maya for the position, that it would mean a significant increase in responsibility and salary. Maya was stunned, having expected to remain in her current role for at least a year before any advancement might be possible. Catherine said that merit mattered in Westbrook-affiliated properties, that Helen did not make recommendations lightly, that if Maya wanted the promotion, she should prepare to interview for it. The interview happened 2 weeks later, conducted by the hotel's general manager, along with representatives from Westbrook Industries' corporate offices. They asked detailed questions about Maya's experience, her approach to problem-solving, her vision for improving operations. Maya answered as honestly as she could, drawing on what she had learned both from her current position and from watching Nathan navigate corporate challenges. When they asked why she wanted the role, she said she wanted to prove that she had earned her place rather than been given it, that she believed in the hotel and its potential, that she was ready for the challenge of leadership. The interview panel exchanged glances that Maya could not read, thanked her for her time, and said they would make a decision within the week. She told Nathan about it that evening, admitting that she was nervous about whether she had said the right things. Nathan listened, and then told her that if Helen had recommended her, the job was probably already hers, that these interviews were often formalities to check for red flags rather than genuine competitions. Maya was not sure whether to find that reassuring or frustrating, because she wanted to believe she was being evaluated on merit alone. Nathan seemed to understand her ambivalence. He said that the Westbrook name opened doors. There was no denying that, but that what she did once those doors were open was entirely her own accomplishment. The call came 3 days later. Maya was offered the position of assistant operations manager, effective immediately. The salary was double what she had been making, and the responsibilities were substantial enough that she would need to reorganize her entire approach to work. She accepted on the spot, hung up the phone, and then sat in stunned silence for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. When Nathan came home that evening, she told him the news. And he did something unexpected. He smiled, not the polite half-smile he usually offered, but a genuine expression of pleasure, and said he was proud of her. The words caught Maya off guard, and she felt her eyes prickle with unexpected emotion. She thanked him. They toasted with wine she found in the kitchen, and for the first time since their strange marriage had begun, Maya felt like she was not just surviving, but actually succeeding. The promotion changed the dynamics at the hotel immediately. Some employees congratulated her warmly, acknowledging her hard work. Others, particularly Vanessa, reacted with barely concealed resentment. Vanessa made a point of questioning Maya's decisions in staff meetings, suggesting that inexperience was a liability in a leadership role, implying that favoritism rather than competence had led to the promotion. Jason, meanwhile, shifted his approach from inappropriate friendliness to professional distance, apparently recognizing that Maya now had power that made targeting her more dangerous. Helen took Maya aside after the first difficult staff meeting and advised her to meet resistance with firm calm, to make decisions based on what was right rather than what would be popular, to remember that leadership meant accepting that not everyone would like you. Maya tried to follow that advice, but the reality of management was harder than she had anticipated. She had to mediate conflicts between employees who had been working together longer than she had been alive, had to enforce policies she did not always agree with, had to make calls that affected people's livelihoods and schedules. There were days when she went home exhausted and doubting every choice she had made, days when the imposter syndrome Catherine had warned her about felt overwhelming. Nathan, to her surprise, became an unexpected source of support. He understood the pressures of leadership in ways Sophie could not, having spent years making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. He listened when Maya needed to vent, offered advice when she asked for it, reminded her that doubt was a sign of taking responsibility seriously rather than evidence of incompetence. One evening, about a month into her new role, Maya was working late at the hotel reviewing performance reports when she realized she had missed dinner entirely. She called Nathan to apologize, expecting him to say it was fine and he had already eaten. But instead he showed up at the hotel an hour later with takeout from her favorite restaurant. They ate in her office, door closed against the curious looks of night staff, and talked about the challenges of balancing work and personal life when you cared about doing both well. Nathan admitted that he had always let work consume him because it was easier than dealing with the emptiness of his personal life, that having someone to come home to, even in their unconventional arrangement, made him think differently about how he spent his time. Maya confessed that she sometimes worried she was becoming the kind of person who measured success by titles and salaries rather than human connections, that the promotion felt good, but also left her wondering what she was building toward. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and then he said something that surprised her. He said that when they had started this arrangement, he had thought he could keep everything compartmentalized, marriage in one box, work in another, emotions safely locked away where they could not complicate things. But compartments required walls, and walls took energy to maintain, and he was tired of expending that energy. He said that he liked coming home to her, liked hearing about her day, liked that she challenged him to think about things differently. He said he was not sure what that meant for the year they had agreed to, but he wanted her to know that she mattered to him as more than just a business arrangement. Maya felt her heart beat faster as she processed his words, trying to determine what he was actually saying beneath the careful phrasing. She told him that she felt the same way, that somewhere along the way this had stopped being about solving practical problems and started being about genuinely caring what happened to each other. They looked at each other across the desk, takeout containers forgotten, and something shifted between them. Nathan reached across and took her hand, and Maya let him, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both natural and monumental. They did not kiss, did not make dramatic declarations, but the air in the office felt charged with possibility. The moment was interrupted by Maya's phone buzzing with an urgent message from the front desk about a guest complaint that needed immediate attention. They pulled apart, both laughing a little at the timing, and Maya had to deal with the crisis while Nathan waited. By the time she finished handling the situation, the intensity of their earlier conversation had faded into something gentler but no less significant. Nathan walked her out to where his driver was waiting, and during the ride home they sat closer together than usual, Maya's head eventually coming to rest on his shoulder in a way that felt easy and right. The following weeks brought an unexpected complication. Catherine called Maya directly, rather than going through Nathan, which was unusual enough that Maya immediately sensed something was wrong. Catherine's voice was carefully neutral as she explained that Nathan's father, Richard Westbrook, was returning to the city after several years of living abroad and managing the company's international divisions. She said that Richard was difficult, that his relationship with Nathan was complicated at best, that his presence would likely create tension. She wanted to warn Maya so she would not be caught off guard, and she wanted to make sure Maya knew that whatever Richard said or did, Catherine supported her position in the family completely. Maya thanked her for the warning and then immediately called Nathan to tell him what Catherine had said. Nathan's reaction was visible even over the phone, a sharp intake of breath followed by a string of curses that Maya had never heard him use before. He said that his father would use any excuse to cause trouble, that Richard had opposed the marriage from the start because he believed Nathan should have married someone from their social circle who could bring political or business connections. He said that Richard would see Maya as a weakness to exploit, that they needed to present an absolutely united front, that any crack in their story would give his father ammunition to use against them both. The warning proved prescient when Richard scheduled an emergency board meeting for the following week, ostensibly to discuss quarterly results, but actually to reassert his influence after his extended absence. Nathan told Maya she should attend as a shareholder representative, since Catherine had transferred some shares into her name as part of the marriage arrangement, a detail Catherine had mentioned casually, but that Maya had not fully processed until now. The idea of attending a high-level corporate board meeting terrified her, but Nathan insisted it was important, that Richard needed to see that Maya was not intimidated by him, that she had a legitimate place in the family structure. The board meeting was held in a conference room at Westbrook Industries headquarters, a gleaming office tower that dominated its block downtown. Maya dressed carefully in a suit Catherine had helped her select. Professional armor designed to project confidence she did not entirely feel. Nathan met her in the lobby, and they rode the elevator up together, his hand finding hers and squeezing once in silent support. The conference room was already full when they entered, executives and board members talking in clusters, and all conversation stopped when they walked in. Maya felt the weight of dozens of eyes assessing her, calculating who she was and what she represented. Richard Westbrook stood at the head of the table, and Maya understood immediately why Nathan found him difficult. He was an older version of his son, tall and commanding, but where Nathan's confidence came from competence, Richard's came from entitlement. He watched Maya and Nathan approach with a slight smile that held no warmth, and when Nathan introduced them, Richard's handshake was perfunctory and dismissive. He made a comment about how nice it was to finally meet Nathan's surprise wife, emphasizing the word surprise in a way that made clear he did not approve. Maya responded politely, but did not let the implied criticism rattle her, and she saw something flash across Richard's face that might have been surprise at her composure. The meeting itself was brutal. Richard challenged every decision Nathan had made in the past quarter, questioned his judgment on key projects, suggested that perhaps Nathan was too young and distracted to handle the presidency effectively. Other board members shifted uncomfortably, clearly torn between supporting Nathan and not wanting to antagonize Richard. Catherine, wheeling her chair to a position directly across from Richard, defended her son with precision and authority, citing specific results and market conditions that justified every choice Nathan had made. But Richard was relentless, and Maya could see the tension in Nathan's shoulders as he responded to each attack with professional calm that barely masked his anger. Then Richard made a mistake. He suggested that Nathan's recent marriage might have compromised his focus, that personal entanglements were a distraction from corporate responsibilities, that perhaps it would be better if the family considered new leadership arrangements. The room went deadly quiet. Nathan was opening his mouth to respond when Maya surprised herself by speaking first. She said, clearly and firmly, that she found it interesting that Richard would question his son's leadership effectiveness when the quarterly results showed record profits in 3 divisions, that suggesting personal happiness was incompatible with professional success revealed more about Richard's own failures than Nathan's capabilities, that perhaps some people simply could not imagine others achieving what they themselves had not. The room erupted in murmurs. Richard's face went red. Catherine was trying not to smile. Nathan stared at Maya with an expression of stunned admiration. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, but she held Richard's gaze without flinching. Richard tried to regain control of the situation by dismissing her comments as those of someone who did not understand business, but Catherine cut him off by calling for a vote of confidence in Nathan's leadership. The vote was overwhelmingly in Nathan's favor, with only Richard and one of his longtime allies abstaining. Richard left the meeting immediately afterward, his face tight with fury, and the other board members came over to congratulate Nathan and to introduce themselves properly to Maya. In the elevator going back down, Nathan was silent until they were alone. Then he turned to Maya and said that what she had done was either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. He was not sure which. Maya laughed, the adrenaline starting to wear off and leaving her shaky. She admitted she had not planned to say anything, that watching Richard attack him had triggered something protective she had not known she felt so strongly. Nathan pulled her close in a sudden embrace that startled them both, and for a moment they just stood there, holding each other while the elevator descended. That evening, Catherine came to the penthouse unannounced, bringing champagne and pastries from Maya's favorite bakery. She said that Maya had made an impression on the board that would not soon be forgotten, that standing up to Richard required courage most people did not have, that she was proud to call Maya her daughter-in-law. Maya felt emotion well up at Catherine's words, realizing that somewhere along the way Catherine had stopped being Nathan's mother, who had orchestrated an arrangement and had become family. They toasted to small victories and standing up to bullies, and Catherine told stories about her own clashes with Richard over the years, painting a picture of a marriage that had been loveless long before it ended. After Catherine left, Maya and Nathan found themselves alone in the living room, the city lights providing ambient glow through the massive windows. Nathan poured them both more champagne and said he wanted to tell her something he probably should have said weeks ago. Maya's heart rate picked up again as she waited for him to continue. Nathan said that when this arrangement started, he had told himself it was temporary, that he would maintain emotional distance, that caring too much was dangerous. But he had failed spectacularly at that goal, because somewhere between shared dinners and late-night conversations and the way she made him laugh when he forgot how, he had fallen in love with her. Maya felt tears start to form as she listened to words she had not realized she was waiting to hear. She told him that she had been trying to convince herself that what she felt was gratitude or partnership or friendship, because falling in love had not been part of the plan, and she was not sure how to handle it. But she had failed at that goal too, because the truth was that she loved him, not because he had rescued her from financial disaster, but because he was kind underneath his serious exterior, because he listened when she talked, because he made her feel like her thoughts and opinions mattered. They kissed then, finally, without the awkwardness of performing for others or the careful distance they had maintained. It was tentative at first, and then deeper. Months of tension and growing feelings finally given permission to exist. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, and Nathan asked if this meant their contractual marriage was upgrading to a real one. Maya laughed and said she thought that had been happening gradually, without either of them noticing. They spent the rest of the evening talking about what this meant, about whether they wanted to tell Catherine immediately or let her figure it out on her own, about how their relationship would change now that they had admitted what they felt. The next morning, Maya woke to find Nathan's side of the bed empty, but heard sounds from the kitchen. She pulled on a robe and found him attempting to make breakfast, burning toast in the process, looking domestic and adorable in a way that made her fall a little more in love. They ate the salvageable parts of his cooking attempt while reading the newspaper together, and Maya realized This was what she had been missing in her previous life. Not luxury or security, but simple companionship with someone who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. At work that week, the tension with Vanessa reached a breaking point. During a staff meeting, Vanessa openly questioned one of Maya's operational decisions, suggesting it showed favoritism and poor judgment. Maya tried to address the concern professionally, but Vanessa kept pushing, her voice rising as she made it clear this was about more than the specific issue at hand. Finally, Helen intervened and said they would discuss it privately after the meeting. In Helen's office afterward, with Vanessa sitting rigid with anger, Helen laid out the facts. Maya's decision had been correct, and by the book, Vanessa's challenge had been inappropriate and unprofessional, and if this pattern continued, there would be consequences for Vanessa's position. Vanessa left the office seething, and Maya thought that would be the end of it. But the following day she discovered that someone had altered documents related to a major event booking, changing dates and requirements in ways that would have caused chaos if Maya had not caught the discrepancies during a routine review. The changes had been made from Vanessa's login, which Vanessa immediately claimed had been used without her permission. Maya brought the issue to Helen, who escalated it to hotel security and IT. The investigation took 2 days and revealed that no one else had accessed Vanessa's account, that the changes had been made deliberately, that this was sabotage rather than a mistake. Helen called Vanessa into her office with Maya and a representative from Human Resources present. Helen's tone was sorrowful but firm as she explained that sabotaging a colleague's work was grounds for immediate termination. Vanessa tried to defend herself, claiming Maya had set her up, that the Westbrook family had orchestrated this to protect their daughter-in-law. But the evidence was clear, and Vanessa's history of complaints about Maya made the motive obvious. Helen handed over the termination paperwork, told Vanessa she had 1 hour to collect her personal belongings and leave the premises, and said that her final paycheck would be mailed to her address on file. Vanessa turned to Maya with eyes full of hatred and said that Maya would never be anything more than someone who married well, that everyone knew she did not deserve her position, that the pretense of earning respect through work was a joke when Westbrook money paved every path. The words hurt, even though Maya knew they were spoken from spite rather than truth. She did not respond, just held Vanessa's gaze until the other woman looked away. After Vanessa left, Helen told Maya not to take the accusations seriously, that Vanessa had created her own problems through her choices, that Maya's work spoke for itself. Maya nodded, but felt shaken anyway, the old insecurities stirring even though logically she knew better. That evening, she told Nathan about what had happened, and he held her while she cried from a mixture of relief and residual hurt. He reminded her that Vanessa's opinion did not define her worth, that the people who mattered, Helen and Catherine and him, knew exactly how capable she was. Maya appreciated the reassurance, but admitted that part of her would always wonder if she had earned her success or simply benefited from circumstances. Nathan said that everyone benefited from circumstances, that the question was not whether you had advantages, but what you did with them, that Maya had taken an opportunity and turned it into genuine achievement. A few weeks later, Jason Palmer unexpectedly resigned from the hotel, citing an opportunity at another property across the country. Maya learned through workplace gossip that Sophie had filed a formal complaint about his past harassment, that an investigation had revealed a pattern of inappropriate conduct with female employees, that he had been given the choice to resign quietly or face termination with cause. Sophie called Maya to tell her directly, saying she had been inspired by Maya standing up to Vanessa to finally take action about Jason's behavior. They met for dinner to celebrate, and Sophie said she felt like she had reclaimed power she had given away when she let Jason manipulate her. Maya was proud of her friend and grateful that the workplace would be safer without Jason's predatory presence. Spring became summer, and Maya discovered to her surprised delight that she genuinely enjoyed her work. The challenges were constant but satisfying, and she found she had a talent for reading people and situations that served her well in hospitality management. Helen began hinting that when she retired in a few years, Maya would be a strong candidate for the operations manager position. The idea seemed impossible and thrilling in equal measure. Catherine continued to be a supportive presence, dropping by the penthouse regularly for tea and conversation, making it clear that she considered Maya family in the fullest sense. Richard Westbrook, thoroughly outmaneuvered by the board vote and Catherine's influence, retreated to focus on international operations and largely left Nathan alone. Maya and Nathan settled into married life with the ease of people who had accidentally built something real while pretending. They went on their first official date, dinner at a restaurant Nathan had made reservations at weeks in advance, nervous like teenagers even though they had been living together for months. They took a long weekend trip upstate to visit Maya's parents, who were initially starstruck by Nathan's wealth and status, but gradually relaxed as they saw how he treated their daughter with genuine affection and respect. They developed inside jokes and comfortable silences, learned each other's rhythms and preferences, discovered that love built slowly on foundation of friendship was steadier than the passionate whirlwinds movies promised. One August evening, Nathan came home with flowers and an unusually serious expression. Maya immediately worried that something was wrong at the company, but Nathan said the business was fine. He said he had been thinking about their arrangement, about the one-year term that was now approaching, about what happened when that deadline arrived. Maya felt her stomach drop, wondering if he was about to suggest they honor the original contract and separate. But Nathan took her hand and said he wanted to propose something different. He wanted them to renew their vows. This time, not as a business arrangement, but as a real marriage. A choice they were both making freely because they loved each other and wanted to build a life together. Maya felt tears start as she said yes without hesitation. Nathan pulled out a ring. Not the simple band she had worn since their courthouse wedding, but an engagement ring with a stone that caught the light and sparkled. He said he knew they had done things backward, that usually the proposal came before the marriage, but that he wanted to do this right and give her a symbol of his commitment that was not tied to contracts or arrangements. Maya laughed through her tears and told him it was the most ridiculous and perfect proposal she could have imagined. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, deciding they wanted something small and intimate, just family and close friends, a celebration of what they had become rather than what they had started as. Catherine was predictably delighted when they told her, claiming credit for bringing them together while also acknowledging they had done the hard work of actually falling in love. She insisted on helping plan the renewal ceremony, and Maya was happy to let her, knowing that Catherine genuinely wanted to be involved rather than simply taking control. They scheduled it for late September, giving them time to organize without drawing it out too long. Maya asked Sophie to stand with her, and Nathan asked an old friend from college who had stayed loyal through Nathan's years of emotional isolation. The ceremony would be in a garden at a small hotel outside the city, surrounded by late-blooming flowers and early autumn color. But 2 weeks before the planned ceremony, Maya started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, she attributed it to stress or something she had eaten, but when the nausea persisted and she realized she had missed a period, she bought a pregnancy test on the way home from work. She took it in the penthouse bathroom with trembling hands, waiting the requisite minutes that felt like hours, and then stared at the 2 clear lines that confirmed what she had already started to suspect. She was pregnant. The news hit her with a complex tangle of emotions: joy, terror, wonder, uncertainty. They had not been trying for this, had been careful about contraception, but apparently not careful enough. She sat on the bathroom floor trying to figure out how she felt, and eventually Nathan came looking for her, concerned when she had been gone so long. Maya showed him the test without saying anything and watched his face cycle through shock and confusion before settling on an expression of pure happiness. He knelt beside her and asked if she was okay, if this was something she wanted, because they would figure it out either way. Maya realized as he spoke that yes, this was something she wanted, more than she had known until it was actually happening. She said so, and Nathan pulled her into a tight embrace, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. They told Catherine the next day over lunch, and her reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. She said she had been hoping for grandchildren, that this was the best possible news, that they needed to make sure Maya had the best prenatal care available. She immediately started planning, talking about nurseries and baby showers and parenting books, her excitement infectious. Nathan gently reminded his mother that they had several months before any of that would be necessary, but Catherine waved him off, saying preparation was never too early. The renewal ceremony took on new significance with the pregnancy news. Maya wore a dress with a flowing silhouette that accommodated her still small bump, and when they exchanged vows in the garden surrounded by people they loved, the words felt weighted with more meaning than they could have had a year ago. Nathan promised to be a true partner and a good father, to honor the woman Maya was and support the person she was still becoming. Maya promised to choose him every day, to build a life together based on trust and honesty and love that had surprised them both. When they kissed, it was to applause and cheers from their small gathering of witnesses, and Maya felt complete in a way she had not known was possible. The reception was held in the hotel's dining room, intimate and warm, with Sophie giving a toast about how she had been skeptical at first, but had never seen her friend happier. Catherine spoke about fate and choice, about how sometimes the universe put people in each other's paths, and the only thing left was to be brave enough to walk together. Nathan's friend told embarrassing stories from college that made everyone laugh and showed a side of Nathan that few people got to see. Maya's parents beamed with pride, her mother already knitting tiny blankets and booties for the baby, even though they did not yet know if it would be a boy or girl. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Maya and Nathan found themselves alone on the hotel terrace, overlooking gardens now shadowed in twilight. Nathan's hand rested gently on Maya's stomach, and they stood in comfortable silence, thinking about the future they were building. Maya reflected on the impossible chain of events that had led here, how helping Catherine that morning had seemed like a disaster at the time, how the missed interview had felt like the end of something when it was actually the beginning. She thought about the scared, unemployed woman she had been and the confident, loved woman she had become, about how much could change in a year when you were brave enough to take chances on unconventional solutions. Nathan asked what she was thinking about, and Maya told him she was grateful for potholes and wheelchair wheels that got stuck, for desperate circumstances that forced unexpected choices, for mothers-in-law who meddled with excellent results. Nathan laughed and said he was grateful too, for women who stopped to help strangers even when it cost them something, for partners who challenged him to be better, for love that built itself quietly while they were focused on other things. They kissed again as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and Maya knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choice 1,000 times over if it meant ending up exactly here, exactly now, exactly with him. The months that followed were a blur of preparation and anticipation. Maya continued working at the hotel through her second trimester, determined to prove she could balance career and impending motherhood. Helen was supportive but practical, helping Maya train an assistant who could take over responsibilities when the baby came, making sure Maya did not overextend herself even when she wanted to. Catherine threw a baby shower that was elegant and emotional, with gifts that ranged from practical necessities to family heirlooms passed down through generations of Westbrooks. Sophie organized a smaller gathering with Maya's work friends, where they played silly games and ate too much cake, and gave Maya advice about parenthood that ranged from useful to terrifying. Nathan transformed one of the penthouse's spare rooms into a nursery, painting walls a soft grey blue and assembling furniture with an intensity that suggested he was channeling nervous energy into productivity. Maya found him there late one night, sitting in the rocking chair they had purchased, looking overwhelmed and vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. He admitted he was scared of being a father, of repeating his own father's mistakes, of not knowing how to be present and loving when he had not seen those qualities modeled. Maya sat in his lap, awkward with her growing belly, and told him that the fact he was worried about it meant he was already better than Richard had been. She said they would figure it out together, that love and intention mattered more than having all the answers, that their child would be lucky to have him. The baby, a girl they decided to name Clara, arrived in early spring with all the drama and intensity birth entails. The labor was long, and there were moments when Maya wondered if she had the strength to finish what she had started, but Nathan stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, even when she yelled at him that this was partly his fault. When Clara finally emerged, red-faced and screaming, Maya felt a love so overwhelming it bordered on frightening. Nathan cried when they placed their daughter in his arms, and Maya saw in his face the transformation she felt in herself, the sudden understanding that life was now divided into before and after this moment. Catherine met her granddaughter that same day, wheeling into the hospital room with flowers and tears, holding Clara with the practiced confidence of someone who remembered how tiny newborns were. She told Clara about the grandmother she was named after, Catherine's own mother, who had been a source of strength and wisdom. She told Maya and Nathan that they had created something beautiful, not just this child, but the family they had built from an unconventional beginning. She said she was proud of them both, and that Clara would grow up knowing she came from love, even if the path to that love had been unusual. Recovery was harder than Maya had anticipated. The exhaustion was profound, the constant needs of an infant consuming every moment. But Nathan surprised her again by being present in ways she had not expected. Changing diapers in the middle of the night, walking Clara around the penthouse when she was fussy, taking parental leave from the company despite Richard's objections that presidents did not take time off for babies. He told Richard that his daughter was more important than quarterly earnings, that he was setting a different example than the one he had received, that if Richard could not understand that then, he had failed to learn anything from the collapse of his own family. The first months with Clara were exhausting and magical in equal measure. Maya had taken a leave from the hotel but found herself thinking about work, less than she had expected, absorbed instead by the tiny person who had upended every aspect of life. Sophie visited frequently, becoming the aunt who could always make Clara smile, who brought meals and offered to hold the baby so Maya could shower without rushing. Maya's parents came for an extended visit, her mother cooking enough food to fill the freezer and her father building a bookshelf for Clara's room, both of them glowing with grandparent pride. Catherine established herself as a fixture in Clara's life, visiting several times a week with books and toys and stories about Nathan's childhood that made him groan with embarrassment. As spring turned to summer, Maya began to feel ready to think about returning to work. The hotel had held her position as promised, but she found herself uncertain about what she wanted. The drive that had pushed her to prove herself, to climb the ladder of management, felt different now that she had Clara depending on her. She talked it over with Nathan during one of Clara's rare naps, admitting she felt torn between the career she had built and the pull to be present for their daughter's early years. Nathan listened without judgment, and then suggested she consider something different, perhaps consulting work that allowed more flexibility, or a reduced schedule at the hotel that gave her the best of both worlds. The conversation led to a new arrangement where Maya returned to the Sterling Crown part-time, working 3 days a week and consulting from home on the other days. Helen supported the decision, saying the hotel industry needed more examples of women successfully balancing career and family, that flexible arrangements should be normalized rather than treated as special accommodations. Maya found the balance easier than she had feared, the structure of work providing adult conversation and intellectual challenge, while still leaving time to watch Clara grow and change. Nathan adjusted his own schedule to be home more, delegating responsibilities he had previously insisted on handling personally, discovering that the company did not actually collapse when he prioritized family over being present for every decision. Richard Westbrook made one last attempt to cause trouble, suggesting at a board meeting that Nathan's focus on work-life balance indicated a lack of commitment to the company. Catherine shut him down immediately, pointing out that Nathan's leadership had produced better results than Richard's absentee management ever had, that modern leadership understood the value of sustainable practice rather than workaholism. The board agreed, and shortly after, Catherine announced she was initiating formal divorce proceedings from Richard, something she said she should have done years ago, but had delayed out of misplaced loyalty to the appearance of family unity. Richard left the company altogether, taking a buyout package and moving permanently to London, where he managed a subsidiary and stayed out of their lives. The absence of Richard's hostile presence made everything easier. Nathan relaxed in ways Maya had not seen before, the tension he carried in his shoulders easing, his smiles coming more readily. He said he felt like he had permission to be happy now, that some part of him had always been waiting for his father to appear and prove that happiness was weakness. Catherine pointed out that she had been trying to teach him that lesson for years, but that sometimes people needed to learn things on their own timeline. She looked healthier too, Maya noticed. The stress of a toxic marriage lifted, her natural vitality returning as she threw herself into being the best grandmother possible. On Clara's first birthday, they gathered at the penthouse for a party that was theoretically for the baby, but really for the adults who wanted to celebrate making it through that first challenging year. Maya looked around at the people who had become her family, Sophie making everyone laugh with her commentary, Helen surprising them with her presence, and a gift of books for Clara's future. Maya's parents showing off photos to anyone who would look. Catherine orchestrating everything with cheerful efficiency. Nathan holding their daughter with visible adoration. This life, so different from anything Maya could have imagined 2 years ago, felt solid and real and chosen. That evening, after everyone had left and Clara was asleep in her crib, Maya found Nathan on the terrace looking out at the city. She joined him, and they stood together as they had after their vow renewal, thinking about paths taken and futures still unfolding. Nathan said he had been doing calculations, that by his count, Maya had changed his life 900 and something days ago by stopping to help his mother. Maya said that sounded about right, though she had lost track of precise numbers. Nathan said he wanted to make sure she knew that every one of those days had been a gift, that he had never expected to be this happy, that he was grateful beyond words, that she had been kind and reckless enough to risk being late to an interview. Maya laughed and said she was grateful too, for potholes that trapped wheels and forced strangers into each other's orbits, for chances taken even when they seemed illogical, for families built through choice as much as blood. She said that if she could go back to that morning and whisper advice to her younger self, who was rushing to an interview she would never make, she would tell that woman to stop and help without hesitation, that the best things in life came from being willing to let plans change. Nathan kissed her temple and said he would tell his younger self to trust his mother's instincts, that Catherine had known what he needed before he did, that resistance to her meddling had been pointless from the start. They went inside to check on Clara one more time before bed, standing together beside the crib watching their daughter sleep. Maya thought about all the moments that had led here, the chain of small choices and accidents that had woven together into this specific life. There were so many points where things could have gone differently, where fear or pride or practicality could have overridden the impulse toward kindness and risk. But they had not, and here was the result. A family, a marriage, a love that was as surprising as it was genuine. As they got ready for bed, Nathan asked Maya what she thought Clara would make of their origin story when she was old enough to hear it. Maya considered and said she hoped Clara would learn that sometimes the best things came from helping others without expecting anything in return, from being brave enough to accept unconventional solutions, from staying open to love, even when it arrived in unexpected packages. She said she hoped Clara would know that her parents had built something real from strange beginnings, that love did not have to look traditional to be true. Nathan agreed and added that he hoped Clara would understand the value of second chances, that people and circumstances were not fixed, but could change and grow, that the willingness to be wrong about your assumptions was a strength. He said he had been wrong about so many things when he met Maya, had thought he knew what he needed and what he was capable of feeling, and being wrong had been the best thing that ever happened to him. Maya smiled and said that being late to an interview had been the best thing that ever happened to her, which made them both laugh at the absurdity of how much had hinged on such a small moment. They climbed into bed, still on the same side they had chosen when they first started this arrangement, but now gravitating toward the middle where they could hold each other. Nathan said goodnight, and Maya echoed it. But before sleep came, she found herself thinking about all the people in the city who were rushing past, moments that might change their lives, too focused on destinations to notice the journey. She thought about the younger version of herself who had almost kept walking, who had nearly let the schedule win over compassion, who had come so close to missing everything that mattered. She was glad she had stopped. Glad she had helped, glad she had said yes to an insane proposal from a woman she barely knew, glad she had given Nathan and herself a chance to become people they had not known they could be. Sleep came gently, and her last conscious thought was gratitude for stuck wheels and missed interviews, and the strange mathematics of fate that sometimes disguised disaster as opportunity. In the morning, Clara would wake them early, and they would stumble through another day of parenthood and work and marriage, building their life one ordinary moment at a time. But for now, they rested in the accumulated peace of choices made and chances taken, in the knowledge that love built slowly was love built to last, in the simple, extraordinary fact of having found each other at all. The months continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of family life. Clara grew and changed, reaching milestones that filled their phones with photos and their hearts with pride. She took her first steps on an autumn afternoon when all 3 generations of Westbrook women were present, causing Catherine to cry with joy while Maya and Nathan documented everything on video. She spoke her first word, which was unfortunately no, because she had heard it so frequently, making everyone laugh at her perfect toddler defiance. She developed her father's serious expression and her mother's tendency to hum when concentrating, a combination that Nathan said was going to make her either a formidable businesswoman or an actual mad scientist. At work, Maya found her role expanding in unexpected directions. The hotel management recognized that her flexible arrangement was not a concession, but actually a valuable model, and they asked her to help develop policies that would make similar flexibility available to other employees. Maya threw herself into the project, researching best practices and interviewing staff about their needs, ultimately creating a framework that gave people more control over their schedules without compromising service quality. The implementation was slow and sometimes messy, but Helen backed her completely, and eventually even skeptical managers admitted that happier employees provided better service. The work earned Maya recognition beyond just the sterling crown, with industry publications profiling her approach and other hotels requesting consultations. Catherine celebrated her 65th birthday with a party that was more intimate than her usual gatherings, just family and close friends, rather than the business associates and social connections that usually dominated her events. She told Maya privately that this was the age she had always imagined as the beginning of the grandmother phase of her life, that having Clara had given her more joy than any professional accomplishment. Maya hugged her, grateful for the ways Catherine had invaded her life with good intentions and stubborn certainty, aware that without Catherine's meddling, she would still be scraping by in an apartment with water stains. She told Catherine that she considered her not just a mother-in-law, but a true mother figure, and Catherine's eyes filled with tears at the acknowledgement. Nathan's relationship with his own role as father continued to deepen. He was unexpectedly patient with Clara's toddler chaos, letting her help with tasks that would have been faster done alone, reading her the same books endlessly without complaint, sitting on the floor to play at her level, even when his back protested the position. He told Maya that being Clara's father felt like a redemption of his own childhood, a chance to provide the presence and attention he had wanted but never received. There were moments when he would watch Clara with an expression of such wonder that Maya fell in love with him all over again, seeing the man he had become layered over the guarded, serious person he had been when they first met. On their second anniversary of the vow renewal ceremony, they took Clara to the same garden hotel where they had recommitted to each other. Clara ran through the flowers they had stood among, and they chased after her while staff members smiled at the young family enjoying the grounds. Later, with Clara napping in her stroller, they sat on the terrace and reflected on how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. Nathan said he sometimes still could not believe this was his life, that he had a partner who understood him and a daughter who made everything mean more, and a family structure that felt chosen rather than obligatory. Maya said she felt the same disbelief sometimes, the sense that she had stumbled into someone else's charmed life, but that the feeling was fading as she accepted that good things could be real and lasting. Richard made a brief reappearance around this time, sending a letter that attempted reconciliation with Nathan, while simultaneously criticizing many of his choices. The letter sat on Nathan's desk for days before he opened it, and when he finally read it, his expression was more sad than angry. He showed it to Maya, and they discussed whether he should respond. Ultimately, Nathan wrote back a short note that acknowledged receipt, but did not engage with Richard's points, simply stating that he was content with his life and hoped Richard could find similar peace. Richard did not reply, and Nathan seemed relieved rather than hurt by the silence. Sophie got engaged to a musician she had been dating for a year, someone who treated her with the respect and affection she deserved, and Maya threw her an engagement party at the penthouse. Watching Sophie glow with happiness, Maya remembered all the times they had supported each other through bad relationships and worse job prospects, how they had dreamed about futures that seemed impossibly far away. Now those futures had arrived, different than they had imagined, but better in their specificity. Sophie whispered to Maya during the party that she was grateful to have a friend who had shown her that unconventional paths could lead to real love, that Maya and Nathan's relationship had helped her believe partnership was possible even after Jason had damaged her trust. Helen announced her retirement, and in the transition meeting she made clear that she was recommending Maya as her successor for operations manager, The recommendation carried weight, and after a series of interviews and presentations, Maya was offered the position. She almost turned it down, afraid that the demands would be incompatible with the balanced life she had built. But Nathan encouraged her to at least negotiate, to see if the terms could work. The hotel proved willing to maintain her flexible schedule with additional support staff, recognizing that losing Maya's expertise would be more costly than accommodating her needs. Maya accepted, becoming one of the youngest operations managers in the hotel chain's history and one of the few who openly structured her work around family priorities. The promotion brought new challenges, but also new satisfactions. Maya implemented more of the flexibility policies she had designed, hired staff who reflected diverse backgrounds and experiences, worked to create a culture where employees felt valued beyond just their productivity. There were critics who said she was too soft, that the hotel industry required harder edges, but the results spoke for themselves. Employee retention improved, guest satisfaction scores increased, the Sterling Crown became known as a place that treated people well at every level. Catherine attended the celebration party the hotel threw for Maya's promotion, and in her toast she said that this was exactly the kind of leadership the world needed, people who understood that success and humanity were not opposites but complements. When Clara turned 2, they had a small party at the penthouse with both sets of grandparents, Sophie and her fiancé. Helen, now retired but still close, and a few of Clara's new friends from the toddler music class Maya had started taking her to. Clara wore a party dress and a crown that kept sliding down over her eyes, was delighted by the attention and cake and presents that she immediately wanted to open. Watching her daughter laugh and play, Maya felt the particular contentment of someone who has built a life brick by careful brick and can finally step back to appreciate the structure. It was not perfect, nothing was, but it was real and stable and filled with people who chose to be there. That evening, after Clara was asleep and the grandparents had left and the apartment was quiet again, Nathan found Maya standing in the nursery doorway watching their daughter breathe in sleep. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood that way for a while, just existing in the peace of the moment. Nathan said he had been thinking about something Catherine once told him, that the best things in life came from saying yes to possibilities you could not fully predict, from trusting that the path would become clear as you walked it. Maya agreed, adding that she had learned the same lesson from a different angle, that sometimes you had to act before you were ready, had to commit before you understood all the implications, had to believe that motion would create its own momentum. They went to bed early, tired from the day's festivities, and lay in comfortable darkness talking about plans for Clara's education, about whether they might want another child eventually, about Nathan's idea to start a foundation focused on creating pathways for people without traditional advantages, about Maya's growing interest in teaching hospitality management at the college level. The conversation wandered through practical details and philosophical questions, the easy back and forth of people who knew each other well enough to think out loud. Eventually, they drifted toward sleep, hands linked between them. And Maya's last thought before unconsciousness was that she hoped everyone got to experience this at least once. The particular joy of ending a day beside someone who felt like home. Years accumulated with a speed that surprised them both. Clara started preschool, making friends and bringing home artwork that covered the refrigerator. Nathan expanded his foundation idea into reality, creating programs that connected young people from underserved communities with mentorships and opportunities in business. Maya did begin teaching, offering a seminar at a local college on hospitality management that became popular enough to expand into a full course. Catherine remained active and involved, her health strong despite the inevitable effects of aging, her wheelchair now motorized and equipped with technology that Nathan had researched and purchased over her protests that she did not need all these bells and whistles. They celebrated Clara's 5th birthday at a small amusement park, and Maya caught Nathan watching their daughter ride a carousel horse with an expression of such pure love that she had to photograph it. Later, he told her that he sometimes felt overwhelmed by how much he cared, that the vulnerability of loving people this much still scared him, even though he had been doing it for years. Maya understood because she felt the same way, the constant awareness that this happiness was precious and therefore fragile, that loving deeply meant accepting the risk of loss. But the alternative, she said, was living defended and alone, and neither of them wanted to return to that way of being. Sophie's wedding was a joyful celebration that Clara served in as flower girl, taking the responsibility very seriously and scattering petals with careful precision. At the reception, Sophie pulled Maya aside and said she wanted to thank her for everything, for showing her what real partnership looked like, for being present through all the years of their friendship. Maya cried because Sophie had been equally essential to her survival and growth, had been there when no one else was, had never wavered in her support even when Maya's choices seemed questionable. They toasted to friendship that lasted, to women who supported each other's dreams, to the ways they had both become people they could be proud of. Around this time, Catherine called Maya and Nathan to her brownstone for what she described as an important conversation. When they arrived, she had documents spread across her dining table and an expression that suggested this was serious business. She explained that she was updating her estate planning and wanted them to understand her decisions. The bulk of her shares in Westbrook Industries would go to Nathan, as expected, but she was designating a significant portion for Clara in trust to be administered by Maya. She was also establishing funds for various charities and creating endowments for programs she cared about. But what she most wanted to discuss was a piece of property she owned upstate, the land where her mother had lived, where Catherine had spent summers as a child. She said she wanted to deed the property to Maya specifically, not jointly to Maya and Nathan, but to Maya alone, as recognition that Maya had earned her place in the family through her own character rather than through marriage. She said the land was special to her, and she wanted it to go to someone who would appreciate it for what it was, rather than what it could be sold for. Maya was overwhelmed by the gesture, asking if Catherine was sure, and Catherine said she had never been more certain of anything. Nathan added that he thought it was a perfect choice, that Maya had changed their family in ways that could not be measured in shares or money, that giving her something meaningful was the least his mother could do. They drove up to see the property on a weekend in late summer, all three of them plus Catherine, who wanted to show them the land herself. It was more beautiful than Maya had expected, rolling hills and forest, and a stream that ran clear over smooth stones. There was a small cottage that needed work, but had good bones, and Catherine talked about how her mother had loved this place, had found peace here, away from the pressures of the Westbrook world. Maya walked the land with Clara on her shoulders, breathing in air that smelled of pine and earth, feeling a connection to this place that surprised her. She could imagine summers here, Clara growing up with this refuge available, the family gathering in a place that had no business pressures or social expectations, just the simplicity of being together in a beautiful setting. Catherine's health began to decline when Clara was 6, nothing dramatic but a gradual slowing that concerned everyone who loved her. She remained sharp mentally, but tired more easily. Had days where the wheelchair was not enough and she needed to stay in bed, accepted reluctantly that she needed more help than she had been willing to admit. Nathan hired a care team to assist her, and Maya visited daily when she could, bringing Clara when Catherine felt up to it. During one of these visits, Catherine told Maya that she had no regrets about her life, that the mistakes and difficulties had been worth it because they had led to this ending, surrounded by family she had helped create. She said that forcing Nathan and Maya together had been the best thing she had ever done, that seeing them build a real life together had given her more satisfaction than any business success. Maya held her hand and thanked her for everything, for interfering at exactly the right moment, for believing in possibilities that seemed absurd, for treating Maya like a daughter from the beginning. Catherine squeezed back and said that Maya had made it easy, that her character had been evident from that first morning on the sidewalk, that anyone who would stop to help a stranger at personal cost was someone worth knowing. She told Maya to take care of Nathan and Clara, to make sure they remembered that love was the point of everything, that success without connection was just elaborate loneliness. Maya promised, tears running down her face, understanding that this was a kind of goodbye, even though Catherine was still here, still present. Catherine passed peacefully a few weeks later, surrounded by family, having said her goodbyes and organized everything with her characteristic thoroughness. The funeral was large and well attended, full of business associates and family friends and people whose lives she had touched. But the memorial service afterward, the one the family organized privately, was small and filled with stories about Catherine's warmth and her meddling and her unshakable belief that she knew what was best for everyone. Nathan gave a eulogy that was both funny and heartbreaking, talking about a mother who had driven him crazy but had ultimately been right about what he needed, who had loved him enough to push him past his defenses. Maya spoke too, talking about sidewalk encounters and stuck wheels, and how a stranger's kindness had changed her life completely, how Catherine had seen something in that moment that Maya herself had not understood. The grief was difficult for all of them, but especially for Nathan, who had lost his remaining parent and his strongest advocate. He retreated into work for a while, the old pattern reasserting itself, until Maya gently confronted him about pulling away. They had a long, difficult conversation about how grief did not have to be faced alone, how family meant sharing burdens rather than protecting each other from pain, how Catherine would have wanted him to lean on the support system she had helped create. Nathan broke down in a way Maya had never seen, years of complicated feelings about his mother and his childhood and his own adequacy spilling out, and she held him through it, bearing witness to pain she could not fix but could at least share. Clara, at 6, understood that Grandma Catherine was gone, but struggled with the permanence of death. They talked about it in age-appropriate ways, reassuring her that love did not end just because someone died, that memories kept people alive in different forms. They established traditions to honor Catherine's memory, an annual donation to the children's hospital she had supported, weekend trips to the upstate property where Catherine's ashes had been scattered, stories shared at dinner about things Catherine had said or done that made them laugh or think differently. Slowly, the acute grief softened into something more bearable, not gone, but integrated into the fabric of their lives. A year after Catherine's death, on what would have been her birthday, they gathered at the brownstone that was now technically Nathan's, but that he had decided to maintain as a kind of family museum, preserved much as Catherine had left it. They toasted her memory with her favorite champagne, told stories that made them laugh through tears, looked through old photographs that showed Catherine in different eras of her life. Maya found one from shortly after Catherine and Richard's wedding, a young woman looking elegant and hopeful in a way that made clear how much had happened since. She showed it to Nathan, and he studied it with an expression of sadness mixed with understanding, seeing his mother as a person separate from her role in his life, recognizing the dreams and disappointments that had shaped her into the formidable woman she became. Life continued with its mixture of ordinary days and significant moments. Clara started elementary school and discovered a love for reading that delighted Maya, who spent evenings curled up with her daughter working through chapter books. Nathan's foundation grew affecting hundreds of lives, creating pathways for people who had faced the same kinds of obstacles Maya had once navigated. Maya wrote a book about hospitality management that became a standard text in college programs, surprised by her own authority on a subject she had learned through necessity and adaptation. They took vacations to places they had always wanted to see, built memories deliberately and with gratitude for the ability to do so. On what would have been their 10th wedding anniversary if they counted from the courthouse ceremony, or their 8th if they counted from the vow renewal, they decided to celebrate both. Sophie helped organize a party at the same garden hotel where they had renewed their vows, and the guest list included everyone who had been part of their journey. Helen, now fully retired and writing her own memoir about hospitality industry leadership. Sophie and her husband, who had recently announced they were expecting their first child. Maya's parents, older but still running their bakery that had expanded to 3 locations with Nathan's initial investment. Colleagues from the hotel and the foundation, friends they had made along the way, Clara's favorite teacher because she had begged to invite her. During the party, Maya and Nathan snuck away for a few minutes of quiet, finding themselves once again on the terrace where they had stood so many times before. Nathan said he had been thinking about all the small choices that had led them here, how either of them could have said no at multiple points, how the whole chain of events could have collapsed if anyone had been less willing to take chances. Maya said she had been thinking about the same thing, about how much hung on that single morning when she had been running late and stopped anyway, about how different her life would be if she had kept walking past Catherine and her stuck wheelchair. They talked about whether they believed in fate or simply in the consequences of actions, whether their meeting had been destined or just fortunate accident. Nathan said he did not think it mattered which it was, that the important thing was they had both chosen to stay once they met, had chosen each other repeatedly in ways that transformed obligation into love. Maya agreed, adding that maybe fate was just another word for the willingness to recognize opportunity when it arrived in unexpected forms, that their success was not about destiny, but about effort and honesty and commitment to building something real. Clara found them eventually, complaining that she was bored and wanted them to come see the dessert table, which apparently had a chocolate fountain that was the most amazing thing she had ever seen. They followed her back to the party, hands linked, and Maya caught Sophie's eye across the room. Sophie raised her glass in a silent toast, acknowledging everything they had been through together, celebrating how far they had both come. Maya returned the gesture, grateful for the friend who had been there from the beginning, who had questioned and supported in equal measure, who had helped her navigate the strangeness of her new life until it stopped being strange and just became life. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Maya found herself thinking about the story she would tell Clara someday about how her parents met. She imagined explaining about the wheelchair and the missed interview and the bizarre proposal, about the contract that became real and the arrangement that evolved into love. She wondered if Clara would understand how much courage it took to say yes to something that made no logical sense, whether she would learn the right lessons about kindness and risk and being open to non-traditional paths. She hoped so, but more than that, she hoped Clara would know she came from love, complicated and hard-won maybe, but love nonetheless. That night, long after they had returned home and Clara was asleep and the city lights glittered through their windows, Maya and Nathan lay in bed talking about nothing in particular, comfortable in the way that long-married couples could be. Maya mentioned that she had been thinking about writing down their story properly, not just the highlights, but the real version with all its messy complexity. Nathan asked why, and Maya said she thought it might be valuable for Clara someday, a record of how imperfect people could build something good when they were willing to try. Nathan said he thought that was a fine idea, as long as Maya included all the parts where he was difficult and stubborn, because the story only worked if it was honest about the struggle required to get from strangers to family. Maya promised honesty, and they talked about what she might include, laughing over memories of their early awkward dinners and their attempts to maintain separate lives in a shared space. Nathan reminded her about the time she had reorganized his entire office without permission, and he had been furious until he realized her system was actually better. Maya countered with the time he had thrown away what he thought was trash, but was actually a sculpture Clara had made at school, leading to tears and a rescue mission to the building's dumpster. They remembered fights they had almost had, but diffused, crises they had weathered together, moments when they had surprised each other with unexpected thoughtfulness or unexpected vulnerability. As they talked, Maya realized that this was what marriage actually was, not the dramatic moments that made good stories, but the accumulated experience of showing up for each other day after ordinary day. It was Nathan bringing her coffee without being asked, and Maya remembering which meetings made him anxious so she could offer support. It was compromise and communication and choosing patience when your first instinct was annoyance. It was work, but work that felt worthwhile because you were building something that made both of you better than you were alone. Sleep came gradually, conversation fading into comfortable silence, and Maya's last conscious thought was a familiar one. Gratitude. For circumstances that forced change, for women who meddled with good intentions, for husbands who learned to love, for daughters who made everything mean more, for friends who stayed steady through transformation, for parents who supported unconventional choices, for the strange mathematics of chance that sometimes aligned perfectly to create a life you did not know you wanted until you were living it. The equation that started with a stuck wheel and a missed interview had somehow solved for love and family and purpose, and Maya would never stop marveling at the elegance of that impossible math. Morning came with Clara jumping on their bed, demanding breakfast and attention, and they stumbled through the start of another day, tired and happy and fully present in the life they had built together. And if that life had started with something as arbitrary and ridiculous as a wheelchair caught in a sidewalk grate, well, Maya thought as she made pancakes while Nathan chased Clara in circles through the living room, sometimes the best things began in the least expected ways. You just had to be brave enough to stop when instinct said to keep running, to help when logic said to protect yourself, to say yes when reason insisted on no. She had stopped, had helped, had said yes, and everything that mattered had followed from those simple choices. The story, she decided as she flipped pancakes and listened to her family laugh, was ultimately about that. About the courage to deviate from plans, about kindness without calculation of return, about building love from the materials of circumstance rather than waiting for perfection to arrive. It was an ordinary story in the end, just people doing their best to create something meaningful from the chaos of possibility. But ordinary stories, Maya had learned, were often the most extraordinary when you lived them with intention and grace and a willingness to be surprised by joy. And this story, her story, their story, was as extraordinary as they came, even if it had started with nothing more remarkable than one woman helping another on a crowded city sidewalk on an otherwise forgettable morning.